Noble Lord Cates. Three very brief points. The first is that the Supreme Court judgment had a logic behind it, and it is very difficult to see, my lords, how that logic does not roll out across a whole bunch of issues, such as this one. So therefore, this amendment does relate very strongly to the Supreme Court judgment. The second point is that the three noble baronesses talking against the amendment were trying to say, well, what point would it have? And yet the noble Baroness Fox stated that there had been reports that the amount of crime committed by females and violent crime had increased, and that this caused some kind of minor moral panic in society. Now, we know, my lords, that women have far lower rates of offending than men, whether biological women, whether non-violent or violent. Our understanding of the role of women in society is very much driven by that understanding of the civilizing impact of womanhood on society. It's fundamental to our ideas of how society works. If we are persuaded by false data that that role of women is changing, that women are becoming more violent, that women are becoming more criminal, if we're falsely persuaded on that, then our view of society is very different. And that's unfortunate if it's false. Finally, my lords, the objections made by the noble baronesses to this amendment fundamentally didn't really argue too much, except for those of the noble Baroness Brinton, didn't much argue the premises, merely argued the practicability, as did indeed some of the noble Baroness Brinton's remarks. So if we're to talk about practicability, first of all we have the evidence that Scotland has already implemented this. So arguments against practicability fall away. But secondly, if we take the noble Baroness Chakravarty's point that you're putting an onus on a policeman to respond to somebody claiming a particular sex or gender, when in fact that may not be correct, was given the lie by her own statement, which is there are lots of people who are happy to come to a police station and confuse things up by deliberately giving the wrong information. So basically she is saying there's a policeman confronted by a 6-foot bloke who says he's a woman, and she's saying, well, it's difficult to confront that person, versus the very correct concern she had of a woman with short hair or whatever, who looks a bit manlike, as you know, many do, being challenged on saying that she was a woman. Now, if they can sort that out in Scotland, they can sort that out in the UK. But in the meantime, which would you prefer? That data is falsified and moral panics emerge, or that police have a slightly bigger onus to try to ascertain what the true biological sex of that individual was?